Hey, I'm Trey Kay, and this is Us and Them. It's the show about the things that divide us from PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting. Homelessness is truly an us and them issue. It's clearly a have or have not situation. It's a subject we've addressed on previous episodes. But I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I feel like I see more people living on the streets. A report from the National Alliance to End Homelessness bears this out. It says that while numbers went down in the past decade, between 2017 and 18, there was a slight uptick in people living without a home. Several months ago, I heard a story about a tent encampment just outside of St. Albans in Kanawha County, West Virginia, where I grew up. Kyle Vass, an independent audio producer in West Virginia, did a report that focused on some homeless people camping on private land. Some nearby neighbors complained to local authorities, and law enforcement showed up to kick these people off for trespassing. That's when local pastor Stan Smith intervened. He bought the land so that the people could stay. Some local neighbors were outraged at Pastor Stan's actions. Even people who didn't live nearby were upset. Here's an excerpt from Kyle's report, produced for West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
They call it Tent City, but actually it looks like a lot of tarps and whatever these people can gather to put shelter over their heads. A lot of trash laying on the ground.
Rick Willis is the administrator of a Facebook group called St. Albans Taking Back Our Community. It has 4,500 members, a number that is nearly half the population of St. Albans.
The purpose is to return the community to its original glory. You didn't have homeless wandering the streets, breaking in people's houses, stealing everything that isn't nailed down.
Rick's group blames people like Stan who offer services to the homeless. They say these services are enabling homelessness.
You've got a church and a minister that bought a piece of property that set up a tent city for some of the homeless vagrants. Of course, you know, there's a lot of people supporting. There's a lot of people that are very angry about what he did. You know, it was done kind of in the dark. It was unpublicized, but, you know, St. Albans is still a small town, and word got around.
They took my picture, posted my address, posted my telephone number, posted my wife's business, posted her name, encouraged people to dump garbage at our house and at her business and at the church. And they did dump garbage at the church.
According to Stan, whoever dumped the garbage on his church lawn did it as an act of revenge. He thinks their rationale goes something like this. You're enabling people who fill our city with garbage, so we're going to dump actual garbage on your property. See how you like it.
I was so intrigued by this story that I wanted to speak more with Kyle Vass, the independent producer who's been following this story. And he is here in studio with me now. Hey, Kyle.
Hey, Trey.
You hear a lot of tension in the community. And like the preacher talked about them putting trash in his front yard. I mean, what were you able to find out about the animosity that people were feeling in the town? Did you get out and talk to people?
Yeah, when I went out and tried to talk to people in the community, nobody really seemed to have a problem with it. The most vocal voices, the pushback that I was able to pick up against Stan and against these residents actually mostly was from this Facebook group that I had talked about in my original piece.
That was the one with Rick Willis, who we heard in the piece?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
And a lot of the criticism that they provide is similar to what you probably hear with the drug epidemic in our state. People are often blaming people who help and labeling them as enablers, saying something like, if you provide help to these people, be it the homeless or people suffering from addiction, what you're doing is facilitating the problem.
It's this whole idea of enabling people. That's why they're so angry at Stan. Do you sense that they might have any compassion or concern about people who really, truly might be down on their luck?
You know, I've followed a lot of the conversations and the threads that go on in that group, and there are people who occasionally pipe up and say, that they have compassion for these people. And those people typically are silenced or banned or are berated and grouped up upon. But you see this is kind of an issue with social media in general. You see people arguing and being really vicious on social media, even probably on your page or my personal page. I don't think it's specific to this group, but there's something to be said about when you can be anonymous, you can be a little bit nastier.
You can be more cruel.
Yeah.
If you don't really have to look somebody in the eye. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
But in your piece, you actually go and visit and speak to some of these folks. Can you tell me what it was like when you first went in to talk to these folks?
Yeah, I actually had to go in there about 3 or 4 times before I was able to use any sort of recording equipment. And that was because in talking to the pastor and in talking to the people, and talking to Stan and talking to the people that I met down there, I asked if I could bring out my recorder. And frankly, people just said no. They weren't comfortable with saying anything on the record. From their perspective, the media coverage surrounding them has not been very good and has not been very accurate in portraying what life is like for them.
So, Kyle, it's been several months since you've done your initial reporting at this tent city in near St. Albans, West Virginia. Has anything changed there since then?
Yeah, since that initial report, the tent city has grown significantly. It's gotten much bigger. There are structures that can be seen from the roadside, and the pushback has continued to increase. Someone has even flown a drone over and taken aerial footage of the camp and of the people in the camp.
I wonder why.
It's my impression that they want to know what's down there, because a lot of the people, I'm speculating, but I think that there's a curiosity that exists within these people. They want to know what the camp looks like. They want to know more about it.
After hearing Kyle's piece, I wanted to see what the camp looked like and to find out more about it, too. So Kyle and I arranged to meet with Pastor Stan and visit the tent city. Oh, and as a heads up, we've bleeped some of the graphic language that might be offensive to some listeners. Kyle and I meet in a parking lot just outside of St. Albans, and we make our way over to Stan's baby blue diesel pickup truck.
Trey.
I'm Trey.
Nice to meet you.
We all pile in and make our way down to this tent city. On our way to the camp, Stan points out a spot in town where a man was arrested by police for camping within the St. Albans city limits.
Mark lived under this bridge that we're going to cross and lived there for off and on for the past year. That's where I met him, and we took food underneath this bridge on the far side, and it crosses the Coal River.
Now, as we're pulling up here, I see several grocery shopping carts that are kind of...
That's no. That's not what we encourage. We encourage them to lose these carts and take them back if they borrowed them. It's one of the ways that they get material here, but I'll talk to them while I'm down here tonight about these carts. They moved them on Sunday, so this is since Sunday.
We make our way down the railroad tracks to the tent city, where we're greeted by Wendy and Casey. We're using their first names to protect their privacy. They've been living in this encampment for a little over a year now. My co-producer, Kyle, is surprised by the structures on the campsite. He says that's changed since he was last there.
I built that.
Yeah, she built it.
Oh,
wow.
Remember you?
Hey, remember me? How you been, man?
Doing good.
Yeah, it looks like you got more shelter here than the last time.
Yeah, there's more people. There's 20 people instead of 9.
How you feel about having more people?
How do I feel about it?
Yeah.
It doesn't really bother me much. I mean, as long as everybody comes in, tries to do better.
Keep the place clean.
Keep the place clean.
As you heard, clean is important to Pastor Stan. Casey and his girlfriend Wendy pride themselves on helping newcomers get settled. Wendy says they've had their hands full.
And there's a few of us can't stand each other, but we put our differences aside because the way we are, we're one big family. You know.
We're fighting for the same thing, just to stay here and survive.
We're all having the same struggles. No matter how much we just, like each other up, we're all having the same struggles, so we still help each other out. Yeah. I mean, I don't know where we would be right now if it wasn't for him.
Thank you.
We just got to start doing our part better than we are.
Struggles. I mean, it's depressing to be here, and they struggle with that. But they really worked hard the past 3 weeks to clean things up.
As we walk through the encampment, I notice that nearly every resident apologizes to Pastor Stan for not keeping the place cleaner. And he says that's okay. But before we got here, Stan told us that he's had to warn the residents that if they can't keep the place cleaner, he'll have to kick them out for a few days in order to clean up all the trash. A resident who's lived here for about 2.5 years, named Michelle, shows us around her campsite. And from the looks of it, she's got housekeeping down to an art form. Her site is really tidy. But as we walk through some mud to the lot just next door, we come across a giant pile of belongings, all mixed together in a heap, with some camping gear and what appears to be garbage.
This is where there was a camp, and people just walked off and left it. So we have to deal with that.
Can you describe me, what do you see there in that
Just
pile?
piles of trash, clothes, and just stuff that he just left. So, and we'll get rid of it, but we can't get in here with a truck right now. You understand, we have to be careful where we step. So there's no way to bring a truck in, but as soon as it dries out.
In the 2.5 years Pastor Stan has owned this property, he says the number of people has nearly tripled. Stan says he tries to keep this place clean. He also tries to see to it that the residents are staying out of trouble. But a bigger camp means more work. The people who live here say that the day-to-day pushback is increased. Casey and another resident named Mike pulled us off to the side to show us something that they'd found online. It's a video of the camp and its residents here, and it appears to be taken from a drone flown overhead. Casey reads the title card from the YouTube video.
Oh, the bums of St. Albans. I see it was really messy there. We've cleaned it up a lot. We worked hard on it. Come live the dream. Oh my God.
Yeah, these are the ones that are against it.
Yeah.
Where'd you find that?
This is the St. Albans taking the community back.
You go YouTube and
And
look
then
up
you go to
Urban.
YouTube, it's called Living the Dream, see?
Go to YouTube and look up Urban Outdoorsman Living the Dream.
Right here.
This sort of attention concerns Stan. He and camp residents say outsiders have come to the tent city looking to sell drugs, steal things, and even pick up women. In fact, as Kyle and I are talking to Stan, a man who is not a resident of the tent city pulls up in a four-wheeler. And he gets an earful from a camp resident.
The four-wheeler. Tired of it.
Let me go deal with this situation.
I don't care, Michelle. I'm tired of it.
Hey, calm down.
Get the fuck out of it. Hey. Hey. I'm sorry, I don't want to be on no camera.
Well, you're not okay.
But I'm tired of him, man.
Okay, well, I'm going to let's walk away from this area. This guy lives across in the apartments, and he's one of the ones that may come down and visit, but he also has made some men jealous because he's been a little flirtatious with their wives.
I mean, is that a problem? Are there people from the community who may be preying on vulnerable women?
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we try to stop it. And I've talked to him several times, and I told him, don't make me get a restraining order tonight. And he said, please don't do that. I said, well, please stay out for a while till things calm down, because you know that you upset him when you come down here.
The camp shows the heartache of people living in poverty, but also the generosity of people taking care of each other. I'm not sure what I expected, but there were surprises. How quickly the camp has grown. That someone flew a drone over these people to see what they were doing. And then this scene that played out with the guy on the four-wheeler. There are lots of layers of divide on display here. Lots of versions of us and them. As we've heard, the camp has its supporters and detractors. After a break, we'll hear from some people who find themselves neighbors to a homeless encampment. I'm Trey Kay, and you're listening to Us and Them, which is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council and the CRC Foundation.
In difficult times, music gives us peace, brings us together, and helps heal us. It calms our nerves and brightens our days. That's why we're bringing you classic episodes of Mountain Stage on air and in our podcast. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find something that's familiar or brand new and feel the power of live music on our website, mountainstage.org.
I'm Trey Kay, and you're listening to Us and Them from West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX. Our trip to the tent city near St. Albans, West Virginia, helped me understand how its growth has affected the people who live there and take care of the camp. But I wonder what sort of impact it has on the surrounding community. How has life changed for the people who live nearby? My co-producer, Kyle Vass, set out to get some answers. Oh, and again, heads up that we've bleeped a bit of the graphic language some listeners might find offensive.
A few weeks ago, I knocked on doors in the neighborhood near the tent city because I wanted to find out what neighbors thought about it. In these conversations, I got 3 different responses. Most people don't even know there is a tent city. Some people aren't thrilled about it, and there is one couple who are strongly opposed to the camp but won't talk publicly. There were these 3 reactions, and then there was Darlene Nickerson.
I'm no better than anybody else. I could be homeless tomorrow the way the economy's going. I mean, my house is paid for, thank God, but no one's guaranteed anything. But I know the good and the bad that are down there.
When Darlene says she knows the good and the bad down there, she's not talking about what goes on. She's talking about specific people she knows personally. When did you meet that couple that you're talking about?
This past summer. We've known them, and my husband's tried to help them out. My husband owns his own business, and he helped the guy get him a job, and he's working with him, and they're trying to save up money to move out.
Darlene's property runs about 100 feet along the main access road to the tent city. She can see all the traffic going in and out. I'm curious what she sees and knows about the camp.
There's been a sharp increase in the last few years since Tent City was moved up there.
One thing that kind of confuses me is that when I've fact-checked this and looked at the history of this encampment where these tents are, it seems to have gone back about 40 years in terms of the number of years that people have been camping back there.
Well, when I moved up there 9 years ago, I had no idea that anybody was living on that property. So I don't know where that came from, the 40 years or whatever. I just know when the pastor bought it, the traffic started coming, people coming onto my property. We have a barn on our property, and my husband mows our grass on a riding lawnmower, and he said, somebody's camped out behind our barn, and he had to clean that up.
Darlene's biggest concern is property crime. She says she and her husband have had to deal with a lot of it, and she's worried it'll only get worse with time.
I see them at 3 o'clock in the morning shining their lights in my yard looking for things, or they're up on a railroad track with a broken down 4-wheeler. And, you can tell. I don't like to look at someone and judge them. I'm not trying to say that. It's just that I've seen it, and I know the ones that have been in my yard and the ones that have stolen, and they're still up there.
Now, Darlene hasn't filed a complaint with the authorities because she prefers to talk to the property owner, Stan Smith, directly. But she isn't sure how seriously he takes her concerns.
He comes back with, oh, it's not them, it's not them. Well, I know it's them. I have cameras.
We have noticed a pretty good uptake in people complaining about, like say, trespassing on property, walking through their yards, mail going through.
That's Kanawha County Sheriff Michael Rutherford. He says despite the increase in property crime, the camp is perfectly legal. He confirms that Stan does periodically check with his office to make sure that none of the residents have any outstanding warrants. And he points out that homelessness in this area isn't a problem specific to this tent city.
It has absolutely exploded all over our county. We've had complaints in areas that we've never had complaints before, of people trespassing, putting up camps on people's property, camping, even on islands in the middle of Elk River. It's been a great increase.
As I'm leaving the sheriff's office, Deputy Brian Humphreys walks with me back to my car. Brian's the officer who responds to all calls involving the tent city. When I ask Brian about the nature of these calls, he says people should call the police when they face an immediate threat. If someone is trespassing on your property or stealing from you, the first thing you should do is call the police. But Brian goes on to say that because police do help solve these immediate problems, that can create an expectation. People might start to expect that homelessness is something that can be policed away. He points out that being homeless is not a crime. Instead, it's a complex issue that takes public and mental health experts, outreach workers, and addiction specialists to resolve. When I was driving around St. Albans trying to find opinions on the tent city, I went into a convenience store, asked the clerk if she knew about the camp, and a man waiting in line blurted out, "Do you want my opinion? Drop a fucking bomb on that place." Hearing that was a harsh reminder that there are people out there who condone violence as a solution to homelessness.
So we've had a tent encampment on the riverbank since I started working here.
Amanda Coleman runs the Harmony House Day Shelter in Huntington, West Virginia. She says the residents of Huntington's homeless camp were peaceful, but some outsiders were not.
A couple of years ago, when the city decided to clear the riverbank of these encampments, there was a tremendous amount of violence down there. And people who lived down there were being targeted by people who were not homeless. So people were going down and setting their tents on fire, setting their stuff on fire when they weren't there, threatening them. People were taking weapons down there.
Amanda says the priority for outreach workers like her is finding permanent housing for people facing homelessness. But even when there is available housing, getting people into those houses isn't always easy.
There are just certain things, no matter how low barrier we are, there are certain things that you have to do in order to get housed. And so it can be time consuming helping people walk through that. You know, for example, we once had a couple living down there that it took a full year to get them to trust us enough to actually come to Harmony House from the riverbank. They weren't even leaving the riverbank. Outreach workers were taking them food and water and clothes and blankets and things like that.
She says forcing people out of these camps will not treat their mental health issues. These mental health issues often make people unsuitable for living in a shelter, and in turn, they'll go somewhere else.
They go to abandoned buildings. And then you have a whole other set of issues. So that the neighborhood that they're in sometimes has concerns. There are accidental fires at times because they're trying to keep warm. They're much harder for us to find.
I've heard the narrative that there are people who prefer to live outside. To me, there's a continuum where this is my choice versus this is somewhere that I just have to be because I have mental health issues. How many people would you say fall towards the I just prefer to be outside versus I'm outside because I need to be for my mental health?
So I've been working at Harmony House for 7 years, and I know of one person who legitimately just wants to live outside. That's it.
Amanda says there are a lot of people who initially say they want to live outside, But in her view, that's usually related to a mental health issue or a fear of how they'll be treated when they try to access housing.
An example is that we brought some clients in, and one of the gentlemen that came in was like, look, I'm just a street kid. I've always been a street kid. That's my culture. That's who I am. So I feel a little strange giving you feedback because I'm not even trying to get housed. And that was I think we did that in the beginning of December. And last week, I was bringing this up that it was interesting to a coworker, and she goes, well, you just got a voucher, right? And so, this guy who was just absolutely, saying he's opposed to being housed, he's got his voucher now and he's looking for an apartment.
According to Amanda, there can be a transition phase when people come back from living outside and try to live indoors.
We've had people who would go to their apartment for a night and then go back to the river for a night and alternate and increase the amount of time they were able to spend inside in order to get used to it. Or before I started here, I heard a story about somebody who they convinced him just to sleep on his porch so that he wouldn't be on the river. And then slowly they were able to get him to go inside. So, there are cases where it's an adjustment, but nobody wants to be homeless.
Although part of Amanda's work is getting people out of tents and into permanent housing, she thinks that places like the tent city serve an important purpose. She says people are safer living together than they would be living outside by themselves. Pastor Stan recognizes that the tent city he helps run isn't the perfect solution.
I don't have all the answers. I'm figuring this out as I go. I just know that it's better to be involved. You saw them tonight and have a relationship with them, that they know me and they'll talk to me and they'll come to me and I'm not an enemy and they know I care. It's better to have that than to have somebody that is stalking them and harassing them.
Stan wants to make improvements to the camp, install running water and pour concrete pads for the tents. And believe it or not, these ideas sound a lot like one of his biggest critics, Darlene Nickerson.
If you're going to have tents set up, make it look like a campground. I mean, come up with the money to put a spigot, someplace where they can get water. Put concrete down there to put the tent on, or something like that instead of the mud that they have to sleep on.
And at the end of the day, Pastor Stan Smith and Darlene Nickerson can agree on a handful of basics.
It's a sad situation. The economy is so bad that any of us could be homeless at any time. So we're not any better than they are.
After hearing this story, I'm reminded of something a local official told me. I'd asked him what people in the county wanted to do for the people in this tent city. And he said mostly people wanted to know what they can do to the people in this encampment, to drive them away. But there's another thing I get from this story. Many of the people that I've met in the St. Albans area, folks on both sides of this issue, people who disagree, sometimes they want the same outcome. Take Pastor Stan Smith, who owns the land, and Darlene Nickerson, who is a neighbor near the tent camp. They both want a positive outcome where people are healthy and safe and obey the law. But there's no agreement as to the best way to make that happen. And that's what makes this story us and them. You've been listening to Us and Them. Our team for this show was me, Trey Kay, Kyle Vass, and Kate Smith. Michael Lipton and Tristan Lozow wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. Mark Lerner designed our logo. Lelena Price provides us with images for the web. The marvelous people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the West Virginia Humanities Council, and the CRC Foundation. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the mentorship program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. We'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.